So I understand today we're going to talk about ClassDojo and Instant Classroom and ClassCraft and Better Sense Timer, which we're using to monitor this conversation.
Yep, we're going to look at all those different tools and how they can be beneficial to classroom management. And we're going to start with ClassDojo. So what were your first impressions of ClassDojo?
Well, my first impressions of ClassDojo were that this was something I could use. When I opened it up, it was user-friendly. I didn't have to spend, an hour looking at the FAQs and tutorials when they give you a 30-second thing. And after that, I felt perfectly confident in my ability to use it. Plus, it was just absolutely adorable. Who doesn't love little monsters?
I agree. I thought it was very cute. And I really liked the whole premise of it. The teacher creating a class of little monsters, and being able to assign points for praise, points for negative behavior, and being able to instantly feed back to the students about their behavior and to keep a record of it as well. So my initial impression was very positive, and as I looked more into it, more benefits became apparent, like the newsfeed feature that lets you post updates to the class that parents can see, and photos and things like that. And also the fact that you can customize the things that you're monitoring.
I completely agree with you. I liked that it was instantaneous. Now, I know that you spoke to a lot of teachers, or at least several teachers, that have used ClassDojo. What were their impressions?
They all told a very similar story in terms of their experiences with ClassDojo. They really loved it. They thought it was a great tool for improving behavior, and it was especially a positive. They used it more as a positive tool. I think students get a lot of immediate negative feedback from teachers in the form of don't do that, stop doing that, be quiet. But it was really beneficial to give that positive reinforcement to the students who were working well, and it encouraged them to keep working well, and the ones who were sort of behaviorally on the fence to start really improving their behavior. So the thing that
sounds incredibly positive.
Yes, the thing that stopped them from well, and then all of them stopped using it is the other feedback I got.
Oh no.
That's right. All of them didn't continue because either it was too much monitoring alongside all the other monitoring that a teacher has to do officially for the school. They forgot to use it regularly, and then it sort of lost its power, or they didn't assign clear rewards for good behavior. So students felt like they were collecting points, and then nothing came of those points, and eventually they kind of got wise to it and said, what's in it for me? So initial very positive feedback, and it definitely showed positive behavioural improvements in all their classes, which was quite astounding, really. But for the teachers themselves, it was too much of a burden on them.
I can relate to that. I looked at ClassCraft a little bit because I teach older children. And
tell me a bit more about ClassCraft. What's that all about?
Well, it's very similar in many ways to ClassDojo in that it's primarily a behavioral management tool. It's on the internet. It's like a game. But it has taken the gaming aspect to a whole new level. And so you can give rewards and consequences for behavioral as well as academic situations, which is, on one hand, very neat. And on the other hand, the thing I got out of it was that it was a lot of work, particularly if you're using another, behavioral management system on top of it, and you're using this to scaffold, because that's kind of what I see ClassDojo and ClassCraft being, is a scaffolding for whatever it is you're already using in your classroom. And in that regard, it's more time consuming than it's worth.
So you sort of see ClassCraft as in some ways the grown-up version of ClassDojo.
Yes. The graphics are way cooler. There's more of a storyline involved. I could see kids really loving it. What I don't see is teachers really loving it. Now, I haven't talked to anybody that's used it, but of course, all of the tutorial videos have really smiling teachers, so they seem to like it. But I mean, what I got out of it was I was going to need to spend hours just learning how to use this thing effectively. I mean, I could probably use it now, but I'm not sure I would be using it effectively. And that was a major turnoff for me. The other thing that was a turnoff for me was the intrinsic versus extrinsic system going on. By the time the kids are in high school, there needs to be an intrinsic motivator, and I don't see that something like ClassDojo or the grown-up version of ClassDojo, which is ClassCraft, providing the intrinsic reward of good behavior and good studying. I mean, it's not like the policeman stops you for driving, the speed limit.
Exactly. No, that's a very good point. So we just talked about ClassCraft being the grown-up version of ClassDojo, but and ClassDojo on the videos you see them see it being used in high school classes and kindergarten classes and all sorts of age groups. My initial impression was that you couldn't use this for high school students. Even middle schoolers would be a bit too wise to it. But what I learned from speaking to the teachers I talked to who'd used it was that they taught between 5th and 8th grade, and they'd all used it.
Okay.
The 5th graders loved it. The 6th graders thought it was wonderful. Another teacher taught 7th and 8th grade, and she said her 7th graders thought it was lame and her 8th graders loved it, which I was quite shocked about because I would have definitely thought 8th graders are too old for ClassDojo with the cute little graphics and the, getting points for doing what you're supposed to. But she said that in her 8th grade class there were a lot of boys. They were very competitive, and they saw that the collecting of points as a challenge and that they wanted to always compete with their friends. And so she went with that, and she used that to great effect for the behavior in her classroom.
Right. I think that ClassCraft is used in the same idea of a competition between yourself and others, and then you can form teams, and you have your team against another team, and that builds into the competitive nature of students already, which in some level I'm not sure we need to foster any more than it already is. I mean, I think healthy competition is good, don't get me wrong, but in some respects, we already have a competitive nature, particularly as we're trying to go towards student-centered learning. It's more about a collective than any one individual.
That's a good point. Going back to ClassDojo for a minute. Another of the we spoke about the giving positive reinforcement for behavior and how it's often difficult to do that in a class setting. And that's one thing that I feel is really strong is the positivity of ClassDojo. It's for behavior management, but it's not do this or you lose points for Gryffindor. It's like if you do well, you get points, and I see you as a teacher. I'm paying attention, and I see and appreciate that you're doing the right thing. And I feel like that's something that's really hard to convey in a classroom without speaking to each individual student. And that ClassDojo can be super helpful in that respect.
I completely agree with you there, particularly because generally we're trying to find a time that isn't, in the middle of what they're doing. We don't want to be an interruption, but then trying to remember that, an hour or two later, and then an hour or two later, it feels a little weird to say, wow, I was really impressed with the fact that you sat and listened, or that you did what you were told, or, you were working quietly during math class, which was before lunch, and now it's dismissal.
Yep. And you can also give them that instant feedback of a quick little ding of a bell. They hear it, they can look at the student can just see it, look at the screen, know that the teacher is paying attention and get right back to their task. Or you can set it to silent and it doesn't beep at all and it's not even a distraction.
All right, so let's talk about pros and cons. What I'm hearing you say about ClassDojo is that it's really a great thing if you're consistent and have the ability to provide some rewards beyond the one reward that you get out of it, particularly in the initial, 3 or 4 months that you're using it, or 5 or 6, whatever is about the cutoff point where you're training kids to really want this thing. So I hear that that's a positive. We also have agreed that it's positive because of the positivity. One of the positives in that sentence. Anyways, because of the positivity on ClassDojo, you're saying, wow, I'm noticing you being good. Whereas we tend to say, wow, I'm noticing you being very bad and stop.
Yes, the communication with parents and the sort of class wall newsfeed communicating photos or events or that it's someone's birthday. All of those can also be a nice thing to have for your class, for parents and students to see. Exactly. In terms of the negatives for ClassDojo, really the only one seems to be that you have to keep doing it, that you have to be consistent, and that can be tricky when there are other things going on in class. If you lose the thread of it for 3 weeks, then it's really hard to get back on track. So just being that extra thing that you have to do, being a phone that's in between your face and the class, taking your attention away from actually looking at the students while you're trying to do this feedback.
Right.
Those would be the negatives.
The other thing I think that I thought of kind of as a negative, I guess, is that there needs to be a cutoff point. At some point, I feel like certainly by the time they go to high school, and certainly this was my negative with ClassCraft, by the time they're old enough for ClassCraft, I really don't want to be continually giving them the motivation to do what it is that they need to do. I feel like at that point, maybe there should be a reward system of some sort, but they need to be self-reporting. It needs to become more about them than it's become about me. Mm-hmm. I think that ClassDojo is great, particularly in the elementary classroom where it needs to be consistent and quick, and kids at that age need a high volume of praise. They need to be noticed, and they need to be noticed all the time.
Yep. And ClassDojo is a really great way of doing that.
By the time they've gotten to 7th, 8th, 9th, you want to start weaning them off so that when they get to college, they're not, why isn't my teacher noticing me all the time? Why isn't there this fun game? Why am I not getting points for doing my, outside reading so that I can be prepared for my lecture? And, why isn't, my teacher patting me on the head every morning?
Sure. So the big question, Laura, is would you use this in your classroom?
I think it would depend at what grade level I'm teaching. I plan to teach high school, even though I would use it in my elementary room. I've taught elementary. I would have used it last year. I really would have used it last year. I don't know that I would use it in my high school classroom. What about you?
I would definitely give it a try with the 6th graders. I think I would do a pilot year with the 6th graders at the start of term and see if I could get them on it. And then if they enjoyed it and if we worked well on it and if it wasn't too much of a burden on me as a new teacher, then I'd carry that through to 7th grade if they wanted. But I think after the 6th grade, I would let it be sort of student driven. If they asked me, are we doing ClassDojo? I would say yes, and we would do it. But I think, to me, the benefits still outweigh the disadvantages. I think it's great.